Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So, we started the first class in fiqh, Islamic law. And that's important, Islamic law, because when you hear people talking, especially non-Muslims talk about Islamic law, all they mention are the penal code, the punishment. Or you want Islamic law, you want Sharia law, then they start talking about people cutting hands, or people getting whipped, or people getting stoned. Islamic law, or the Sharia, is what governs every single aspect of the Muslim life. And the penal code is such a minimal part of it, probably not even more than 5%, or even less, maybe 1 or 2% of the different regulations that govern the life of the Muslim. The life of the Muslim is governed with regards to his belief, his actions, his conduct with his family, with his children, with people at work, with people in the community. And before all this, his conduct and behavior with his Lord, Allah Azza wa Jal, al-ibadat. And that's why the Islamic law, they divide it into al-ibadat wal-mu'amalat. And there's other thing called akhlaq or adab. And then there's also the hudud. So ibadat means acts of worship. This governs how we worship Allah, our relationship with Allah. Mu'amalat are the dealings between different individuals. And this can be also divided in different categories, because there's ahkam al-usra. Mu'amalat, the dealings within the family. Okay, there's mu'amalat maliyah, financial dealings, transactions, and so on. So mu'amalat is a big category as well. Then you have also the penal code, the penalties, and that's a small part, and so on. And then you have the akhlaq and adab, the etiquettes and the morals. All these are part of the Islamic law. So very superficial and very unfair view if they just look at the penal code. Here we start to talk about the first and most important thing in the Islamic law is the prayer. Because after declaring the Shahada, testimony of faith that somebody enters Islam with, then the first act of worship that he has to try to perfect comes the prayer, the relationship between a person and Allah. And Prophet ﷺ has indicated to us, he says, مفتاحها الطهور. The key to the salah, you cannot enter the salah without the key. And the key is purification. So that leads the scholars to start with talking about the different kinds of water, different kinds of vessels, and different ways to purify oneself before they stand in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla. So it's a big topic. In the last class, we just started to talk about the different kinds of waters, and the three big categories are the tahur, and then you have tahir and you have najis. Tahur means purifying. Tahir means pure but not purifying. And then najis means impure. So the purifying water, tahur, is the only kind that you can use for your wudu, for the ablution, for the ghusl, for the wash, ritual wash. And also we use those kind of waters to cleanse any kind of physical and tangible impurities. So we use them to remove tangible and physical impurities. Examples would be like urine, feces. These are physical material impurities. And there's spiritual impurity, which you cannot see. The spiritual impurity is the state of the body after somebody, for instance, urinates or defecates or passes gas. This is the minor impurity. And then there's the major impurity that happens if somebody, for instance, has sexual intercourse or ejaculates. This is the major impurity. The major impurity requires the person do the ritual wash for the whole body. But the minor impurity requires what? The wudu, the ablution, to be able to stand in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. So the waters are used for these things, for the ritual impurities, the minor and the major, and they're also used to cleanse any physical impurities. Okay, and basically the water, the rule of thumb is that the water that comes naturally from the heavens, from the sky, is purifying. And this water will run in rivers. Rivers are purifying. Springs are purifying. Sea water is purifying. The water of Zamzam is purifying. The water in the ponds, that even if it is stagnant and has changed a little bit, but changed a little bit with natural and pure items, not impure, as long as it hasn't totally transformed into something else other than water. If it becomes totally like mud, for instance, if you look at it, you say this is a mud pool, then you cannot use it for wudu because it's no longer called water. But if it is water that is a little bit muddy, you can still use it. Okay? So when somebody looks at it, is it water or is it mud? If it's mud pool like what the elephants wash themselves in, then it's no longer something that you can use. Although it is considered what, pure or najis? Pure. It is still pure because no unclean or matter or impurity has fallen into it. Okay, and we even talked about the water. If somebody else has used it, that does not render it impure. You can still use from it. Prophet ﷺ, multiple times, it's mentioned by many of his companions, when they used to be on expeditions and journeys and they run out of water, he would make supplication and invocation to Allah, and the water would spring from in between his fingers. He would put his hand in a pot, and water would gush to the extent that the whole army would fill their pots from that pot, and they drink and give water to their animals and store water. And that is water that basically comes from the hand of the Prophet ﷺ. So that they use this also as evidence that any kind of water that has already been used or touched the skin of somebody else is also purifying. Okay, and also because the Prophet ﷺ used to do the wash sometimes with his wives from the same vessel. They used to make the ghusl or the wudu, and the water would drip back into that vessel and he would use it again, and that was fine as well. Okay, and we mentioned that the water, if it is mixed with something that is pure but still is considered as water, like such as water with soap, and here they used to use something called sidr, which are nice fragrant leaves that they used to put in the water, still that is considered purifying, tahur. Okay, that is a summary. Inshallah, we will try to always limit the class. I don't want it to be too long. Yesterday we went for 22 minutes. I want 20 minutes to be the limit, but 15 minutes to be the goal. Okay, okay. If you keep, who's going to keep track of time, inshallah? Keep track of time, inshallah, Munir? What? Okay, probably we've been going at least for 8 minutes, maybe. Yeah, so we want 10 minutes is our goal from now, okay? And then you have the pure water. It is the water that has been changed. Its characteristics and qualities have changed by something pure that has mixed with it. That is called al-ma' tahir ghayr mutahhir. This you cannot use for wudu. For instance, if you mix, if you're making some kind of stew or gravy or something, and you can see it is still mostly water, like 70 or 80% water, but if you look at it, it's no longer called water. It's called some kind of or curry. we have also something called mulukhiyah. So I cannot make wudu with mulukhiyah, and you cannot make wudu with curry, right? It's no longer called water. Yes, it is, and that's important. Yeah, it is pure, but it's not purifying now. And then you have the water that is najis. Najis, unclear, impure water. That is the water that has been stained or mixed with something that is impure, such as urine or feces, and it has changed. The color or the smell has changed, and then you would know that this water is najis. You cannot use anymore. Okay, that is quite clear. Ibn Taymiyyah says, إذا الماء إذا تغير بالنجاسات فإنه ينجس بالاتفاق. That's a consensus between all scholars. It's quite clear. And it doesn't matter if the water was plenty or little, as long as it has changed in its characteristics, then it's no longer a pure water. Okay.
So sometimes stationary water is not considered to be eligible for wudu. Stationary water.
No, we talked about this yesterday. Stationary water.
As long as its configuration hasn't changed.
No, even if it has changed. Stationary water we talked about. It's mal ajin they call it. The water that has changed by being stationary, and algae grew into it, or leaves fell into it, or mud mixed with it, as long as it is still water, but it's not totally clean, but it's still water, and it was not changed by something that is impure or unclean, you can use it. You can use it. Right? So then he's going to talk about what is considered as najis. In Sharia, and this is good because the book basically tells us, he gives us a classification and sums up every topic. And najasat, what is considered impure? We just talked about a couple of them. Al-gha'it. Al-gha'it means the feces. Gha'it al-adami. And also the urine, that is quite clear. And there's many pieces of evidence for this. As you know, when a man one time urinated in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, he ordered that it be cleansed with a whole bucket of waters to be poured on top of it, basically to clean it out, you know. Also, Prophet ﷺ indicated that if you walk and some najasa, you step on urine or feces or something, he says, إِذَا وَطِئَ أَحَدُكُمْ بِنْ عَلَيْهِ الْأَذَى فَإِنَّ التُّرَابَ لَهُ طَهُورٌ. That's important as well. He says, if you step on urine or feces, he says, and then you keep on walking, the earth, the turab, the earth is a tahur for it, is purifying for it. That's very good, important, okay? So if you keep on walking after that until there's no trace of that thing, then it is no longer unclean. Okay. Also, the hadith of the two people who were being punished in their grave. Yes, what it is exactly. He said the reason they were being punished. He says one of them did not. كان لا يتحرز من بوله. Actually, لا يتحرز من بوله doesn't mean he wasn't only cleaning. It means that he wasn't avoiding his urine. Like say he might urinate, for instance, against the wall, and the urine will splash back on him, and he didn't care about that. So لا يحترز من بوله, لا يتحرز من بوله means he wasn't avoiding his urine. That's very important because we have to be very careful with this matter, because even small drops come on our clothing or something, then we shouldn't be praying in those clothing. If they come on our skin, then we have to wash it off, and of course after urinating, a Muslim has to wash also his private parts, and he has to wash basically for a man, for instance, he has to wash the penis and also the testicles, not just the penis, not just the orifice where the urine came out from. He has to wash the whole thing. Okay. And this is one of the nice and clean qualities of Muslims. You won't find anybody else on earth who cleanses their private parts as frequent as a Muslim man or woman does. And that is because of the guidance given to us through this Islamic law, the Sharia, that Allah has given us. Now, Prophet ﷺ indicated also that the urine of al-ghulam, bawl al-ghulam yundah wa bawl al-jariyati yughsal, that you have to wash. If a child urinates on the clothing, it has to be washed, except of course if it was a young boy that hasn't really eaten yet, he's just breastfeeding still. Okay. Also, Prophet ﷺ one time was praying, and during the salah he took off his shoes. You guys are familiar with this hadith or not? Yes, he took off his shoes during the salah. And that's a sign, that also tells us that if somebody has to move in the salah for a reason and a necessity, you're allowed to move. And you can't say, I'm not going to move in the salah. Just like sometimes even a phone rings, and the general rule is that we should make our phones silent or leave them in the cars. But if a phone rings, some people don't want to move. They stay like this, but the phone rings and nobody can focus anymore in the salah for the whole rak'ah. No. The moment it starts ringing, you stick your hand in your pocket and make it silent or switch it off, okay? But don't answer in the salah.
One of the guys, he said, Anas only.
So, okay, but see this hadith, and every hadith mentioned in this book, alhamdulillah, is authentic. He says here, when he took off the shoes in the salah, the companions praying behind him took off their shoes as well, automatically. And this shows us that they used to emulate the Prophet ﷺ in everything, whether they knew a reason behind it or not. So Prophet ﷺ, after the salah, he said to them, what made you take off your shoes? They said, we saw you take off your shoes, so we took off our shoes. And then he basically informed them that, no, I took them off for a reason. Jibreel came to me during my salah and told me that they had some impurity, something impure, something unclean, so I took them off. Now,
I've been praying outside. So they are praying with shoes.
Yeah, no, they prayed with shoes in general. In general, they prayed with shoes.
Even
In the masjid. Because the masjid was earth as well. It wasn't carpet.
Okay.
Of course, it was earth and just stones. Mm-hmm. Even in the hadith of Layt al-Qadr, رَأَيْتُنِي أَسْجُدُ فِي مَاءٍ وَطِينٍ. He says, the sign given to him that he saw that this will be Layt al-Qadr is that he makes sujood in mud. As he was making sujood, he was making sujood in mud. So all this was covered in mud during that Layt al-Qadr. Okay? So yes, no. This hadith also tells us that if somebody had an impurity on his clothing or on his body that he was not aware of until he finished the salah or finished part of the salah, this part or this whole salah is accepted. We know this because Prophet ﷺ did not repeat the salah. He has already done part of the salah with that najasa on his shoes, but he was not aware. You follow? That is different from not having wudu. If you don't have the wudu and you remember, I didn't have wudu, no, you have to repeat it. But if you remember that I had najasa on my clothing, that I was wanting to clean, but I forgot to clean, I wanted to change, but did not change, and I forgot and I prayed with that impurity on my clothing or on my skin, no, your salah is okay, but don't repeat it and be more vigilant next time, okay?
If you remember still praying, what you will do?
To take off your shoes, but don't take off your clothes. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm gonna have to go back to references to answer this question. What do you do if you had the najasa in your underwear in the salah and you remember in the middle of the salah? You're really in a problem here. Yeah, inshallah, we'll look this up. But once you know, you're not really allowed to continue salah with it. If I was to give an answer for myself, but I'll look it up, I would say you would have to leave the salah, go and change, wash, and come back and do the salah altogether. Because you cannot really fix it, and you cannot continue the salah with knowing that you have najasa, because it's a precondition for the salah, and now you're aware of it. If I just look at the rules, and that's important to just to know, try to know general rules and because the fiqh is basically like solving problems. Once we get to know the evidences, the hadith and ayat, and then learn something called usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh are basically the rules of understanding those texts, because there are rules. And those rules are extracted from the texts and also, of course, from common sense and logic as well. But inshallah, we'll look it up. Okay, I may be wrong. And there might be difference in opinion, but we'll try to find out for you, okay?
Even for wudu, if you remember during salah, you have to.
Of course. Yeah, wudu right away, right? Of course, yeah. And then the second najasa, the second impurity is damul hayd, the blood of menstruation. Not every blood, the blood of menstruation. So if somebody is wounded for some reason and he's bleeding, or there's blood on their clothing, or somebody who works in slaughtering animals and he had some blood on his clothing, no, that's fine. He can pray with that blood on the clothing. Sahaba used to go in battles, used to be injured. Umar al-Khattab, he prayed his last salah, and the description given by the companions, وَجُرْحُهُ يَثْعُبُ دَمًا, it was gushing with blood while he was praying. He was gushing with blood before the prayer as well, but then he asked, when is the salah time? And they said to him, oh, you're bleeding and you're dying. He says, no, I will get up and pray. فَإِنَّهُ لَا حَظَّ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ لِمَنْ تَرَكَ الصَّلَاةِ. He says, anybody who doesn't pray is not a Muslim. Umar al-Khattab is saying this while he's dying. And he got up and prayed while he was still bleeding, profusely bleeding. Okay? And that is why Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahabiyat, the lady companions, to definitely they have to wash every trace of the menstrual blood from their clothing, from their body, before they're allowed to pray. Also, what is unclean is something called al-wadi and al-madhi. These are secretions that come out from the man. Madhi comes out with sexual arousal. It is clear and it is a little bit lubricant. Lesage. So that's called madhi. Wadi is another clear fluid that comes out from the penis, but it doesn't come out with arousal. But it's still clear. Not every person maybe has noticed it, but they say it comes out if somebody is exposed to cold weather sometimes. That both of them are cold. Both of them are najis. If you find them on your clothing, you have to wash them. You have to wash them. Okay, that is different from al-mani. The mani, the semen, is not najis. Semen is not najis. So if there were some traces of semen on clothing, of course, a Muslim has to try to be as clean as possible. If you know there's semen on your clothing, you have to try to clean it, not because it is najis, but because out of just general cleanliness. Okay? But if somebody just didn't notice some on his clothing, some trace, that is fine. And even if it's dry, he can just rub it off. That is also fine.
Since you taught us before that if it's muddy, we will just put water, make sure that the water sinks down.
Exactly.
And that should be okay.
Yeah. We haven't come to how to clean the madhi and wadi. We haven't come to that. But we're just saying that it is najis. But the najasa, good one. The najasa, the level of najasa, the level of uncleanliness or impurity of madhi in particular that comes with sexual arousal, it is a lighter kind of najasa. You don't have to wash it in the washer. You just have to, drip some drops of water on top of it until the water comes out from the other side of that fabric. So let's say it's right here. So you put some water on top until you notice the water coming out in that spot. From the other side, that is enough for the madhi. Especially the madhi is a lighter najasa. Okay, and now time. Okay, we'll stop here inshallah. Maybe if we have time after Isha, we might complete the anwa' al-najasat. It's good to finish one topic at a time. There are 11 kinds of najasa. We have finished already 4 of them. Okay, stop here inshallah.